Ooh, we on part 3 already, man. I'm gonna be talking about disbelief. Doubt is the first stage of knowledge. A settled allegory concerning the secrets of alchemy by Michael Maier in 1617 AD. The art of alchemy has been a secret since the beginning of our recorded history, and so there have always been many people who simply do not believe in it, of course. This is, of course, made worse by the obscure way in which the alchemical books are written and the fact that alchemists have wanted to remain hidden, and so never openly revealed themselves or their works to the world. Now is the exception, and the first exception, in probably 12,000 years. Disbelief stems from not understanding, which is simply ignorance. Anything which is not true cannot be understood. That is, it does not make sense. All true things must make sense. All true things must be in accordance with what we know about nature and the universe. That is to say that they are natural. Nothing true can be unnatural because nature is everything, and so nothing is outside of nature. Things that cannot be understood do not exist. They are lies and therefore against nature. All things that exist are in accordance with nature, so all things that are true are in accordance with nature. The art of alchemy is only the imitation and acceleration of nature, so it is not possible to say that alchemy is untrue under this definition. This would be the same as saying that nature is untrue. So the definition of alchemy is self-supporting, as it only claims something based on what we already know to be true. Alchemy is the imitation and acceleration of nature. We know that nature is true, so alchemy must also be true. The only argument here is if you don't believe that alchemy is an imitation and acceleration of nature. By now, you should be knowing. Or so you cannot complain that no one has explained it to you. Any truth must be in accordance with nature, understandable, logical, and it must make sense. If you believe something that does not fit this category, then your disbelief is only ignorance. All things are understandable. It's if you choose to understand or not. If your knowledge has been able to reach the point to where you are no longer ignorant. So denying the truth only stems from your ignorance of knowing the truth. You may still object to the concept that nature, or i.e. alchemy, can produce a stone capable of the powers described in the previous parts. The explanation of why this is the case is so simple that it is difficult to explain, as it is obvious. And who can explain something to someone who fails to see what is directly in front of their eyes on a daily basis? It is nature that is the force which operates on this universe. It created us. We are here. We are alive. Nature already created all the gold in the world. How can one accept the ability of nature to create life and then dismiss the ability to prolong it? How can one accept the ability of nature to make gold and then dismiss this in the same sentence? We know that nature creates life. We know that nature creates gold. Alchemy is the imitation and acceleration of nature. So these things can be achieved with the art of alchemy. To summarize, if nature can give life, we can give life. If nature can make gold, we can make gold. Nature does it every day. So who are you to say that it is impossible when it is before your very eyes? You got to understand this. It's deep, right? They say, oh, you can't turn lead into gold. You can't turn base metals into gold. Well, nature does it. Where do you think gold came from in the first place? How did the diamond develop? There are people who can hear this and not understand it. But the reason for this is not that what is told here is too complicated for these people, but that it is too simple for these people. The disbelievers are so inflated with their own egotistic vanity that they are unable to see the truth even when it walks right up to them and slaps them across the face. These are the same people who walk around claiming to understand quantum theory, string theory, etc., even when the inventors of those theories claim not fully to understand it themselves. They are models, not truths. The only argument against alchemy is therefore ignorance, but whatever you believe, it doesn't change the truth. Quote, Both among ancients and moderns, the question whether alchemy be a real art or a mere imposture has exercised many heads and pens. In the case of a science which is familiarly known to a great body of learned men, the mere fact that they all believe in it supersedes the necessity of proof. But this rule does not apply to the art of alchemy, whose pretensions therefore need to be carefully and jealously sifted. The arguments which make against the justice of those claims must be fairly stated, and it will be for the professors of the art to turn back the edge of all adverse reasoning. Every ordinary art, as we learn in the second book of the Physics, is either dispositive of substance or productive of form, or it teaches the use of something. Our art, however, does not belong to any one of these categories. It may be described indeed as both dispositive and productive, but it does not teach the use of anything. It truly instructs us how to know the one substance exclusively designed by nature for a certain purpose, and it also acquaints us with the natural methods of treating and manipulating this substance, a knowledge which may be either practically or speculatively present in the mind of the master. There are other crafts which are not artificial but natural, such as the arts of medicine, of horticulture, of glass-blowing. They are arts insofar as they require an operator, but they are natural insofar as they are based upon facts of nature. Such is the art of alchemy. Some arts systemize the creations of the human mind, as for instance those of grammar, logic, and rhetoric, but alchemy does not belong to this class. Yet alchemy resembles other arts in the following respect: that its practice must be preceded by theory and investigation, for before we can know how to do a thing, we must understand all the conditions and circumstances under which it is produced. If we rightly apprehend the cause or causes of a thing, for there often is a multiplicity or complication of causes, we also know how to produce that thing. But it must further be considered that no one can claim to be heard in regard to the truth or falsity of this art who does not clearly understand the matter at issue. And we may lay it down as a rule that those who set up as judges of this question whether we brought clear insight into the conditions of the controversy should be regarded as persons who are talking wildly and at random. Aristotle, in the Dialectics, says that every master has a right to speak authoritatively with reference to his own art. According to this rule, it is the sages, and the sages only, that ought to be consulted with reference to the truth of alchemy. No man in his senses would deny the truth of alchemy for the very insufficient reason that he himself is ignorant of it. Such a person would be content with the authority of weighty names like Hermes, Hippocrates, and numerous others. There are many reasons why the masters conceal this art, but if any one denies its existence on the ground that he is ignorant of it, he is like someone who has been shut up all his life in a certain house, and therefore denies that the world extends beyond the four walls of his habitation. There is not really any need to advance any arguments to establish the actuality of our art, for the art itself is the best proof of its own existence. And being securely lodged in the stronghold of knowledge, we might safely despise the contradiction of the ignorant. In all operative sciences, as Aristotle sets forth, the truth of a proposition ought to be sown, not by logical argument, but by ocular demonstration. The appeal should be not to the intellect, but to the senses. For particulars belong to the domain of sense, while universals belong to the domain of reason. If we are unable to convey to any one an ocular proof of our art, this fact must not be regarded as casting a slur on our veracity. The difficulty of our task is enhanced by the circumstance that we have to speak of our art to the ignorant and scornful, and are thus in the position of a painter who should attempt to explain nice shades and differences of color to the color-blind, or of a musician who should discourse sweet harmony to the deaf. Every one, says Aristotle, is able to form a correct opinion only of those things which are familiar and then accurately known to him. But he who denies that snow is white cannot have any eyes in his head. How can anyone discover the truth in regard to any science if he lacks the sense to distinguish the special province of matter, or the material relations with which that science deals? Such people need to exercise faith, even to become aware of the existence of our art. Pythagoras of the Turba Philosopher Forum says that those who are acquainted with the elements will not be numbered among deniers. A doctor who desires to prove that a certain medicine will produce a certain effect in a diseased condition of the human body must substantiate his position by practical experiment. For instance, someone suffers from a superabundance of red color in the veins of a stomach and liver, and I say that the cure is an evacuation after digestion. If I wish to discover what medicine would produce this effect, I would say everything that, after digestion, produces an evacuation of bile will heal the patient. Now, I know that rhubarb or scamonia will produce this effect. Therefore, rhubarb and scamonia will be the right remedy to choose. Nevertheless, the truth of my assertion could be satisfactorily proven only by means of a practical experiment. In all of these manners, as Hammock says, nothing short of seeing a thing will help you to know it. If you wish to know that pepper is hot and that vinegar is cooling, that colocynth and absinthe are bitter, that honey is sweet and that aconite is poison, that the magnet attracts steel, that arsenic whitens brass, and that tutia turns it of an orange color, you will, in every one of these cases, have to verify the assertion by experience. It is the same in geometry, astronomy, music, perspective, and other sciences with a practical scope and aim. A like rule applies with double force to alchemy, which undertakes and transmutes the base metals into gold and silver. Whatsoever has the power to transmute imperfect and complete metals has the power to make gold and silver. Now, this quality is possessed by the stone, which the philosophers make known to us. It is plain that there are but two perfect metals, namely gold and silver, just as there are but two perfect luminaries, namely the sun and moon. The other metals are imperfect and incomplete, and whosoever educes them to perfection, the same also converts them into gold and silver. The truth and justice of this claim, like all other propositions of a practical nature, has to be demonstrated by a practical experiment, and in no other way can it be satisfactorily shown. But such a practical demonstration would, on the other hand, once for all put an end to the controversy and convincingly demonstrate to every well-regulated mind the truth of the art by which it is accomplished. Find our art, says Galen, and you will have proved its reality, which is performed not by the first principles of art, but by its operations. It is absurd to prove the existence of nature, or to argue the possibility of what is known. Those who are ignorant of any science are like the spectators who can distinguish neither the persons nor the gestures on the stage. A blind man might as well discourse about colors and criticize the merits of a picture. A deaf man might as well set up as a judge of some musical composition as an uninformed person presume to deliver judgment on the claims of the art of alchemy. When, indeed, the stone is found, our friends, who now laugh and sneer at us, will be at a loss how to express their love." Unquote. The New Pearl of Great Price by Peter Bonos, 1338 AD. For the matter is only one thing, and would remain one thing, though 100,000 books had been written about it, because this art is so great a treasure that the whole world would not be a sufficient compensation for it. It is described in obscure terms, yet openly named by all and known to all. But if all knew its secret, no one would work, and it would lose its value. On this account, it would be impious to describe it in universally intelligible language. He to whom God will reveal it may understand these dark expressions, but because most men do not understand him, they are inclined to regard our art as impossible, and the sages are branded as wicked men and swindlers. Learned doctors, who thus speak of us, have it before their eyes every day, but they do not understand it, because they never attend to it. And then, forsooth, they deny the possibility of finding the stone, nor will anyone ever be able to conceive or convince them of the reality of our art, so long as they blindly follow their own bent and inclination. In short, they are too wise to discern it, since it transcends the range of the human intellect and must be humbly received at the hand of God. It is in their own ignorance, the skeptics, that prevents them from attaining to a true knowledge, but they put the blame on our writings and call us charlatans and impostors. They argue if the stone could be found at all, they must have discovered it long ago, their eyes being as keen and their minds as acute as they are. Behold, say they, how we have toiled day and night, how many books we have read, and how many years we have spent in our laboratories. Surely if there were anything in this art, it could not have escaped us. By speaking thus, they only exhibit their own presumption and folly. They themselves have no eyes, and they make that an argument for blaspheming our high and holy art. Hermes is right in saying that our art is true and has been rightly handed down by the sages. All doubts concerning it have arisen through false interpretation of the mystic language of the philosophers. But since they are loath to confess their own ignorance, their readers prefer to say that the words of the sages are imposture and falsehood. The fault really lies with the ignorant reader, who does not understand the style of the philosophers. If, in the interpretation of our books, they would suffer themselves to be guided by the teaching of nature, rather than by their own foolish notions, they would not miss the mark so hopelessly. A quote from The Glory of the World, or Table of Paradise, by Anonymous, 1526 AD. Quote, I, being an anonymous adept, a lover of learning, and a philosopher, have decreed to write this little treatise of medicinal, chemical, and physical arcana. In the year 1645 after the birth of Christ, and in the 23rd year of my age, to assist in conducting my straying brethren out of the labyrinth of air, and with the further object of making myself known to other sages, holding aloft a torch which may be visible far and wide to those who are groping in the darkness of ignorance. The contents of this book are not fables, but real experiments which I have seen, touched, and handled, as an adept will easily conclude from these lines. I have written more plainly about this art than any of my predecessors. Sometimes I have found myself on the very verge of breaking my vow, and once or twice I had to lay down my pen for a season, but I could not resist the inward prompting of God which expelled me to preserve or persevere in the most loving course, who alone knows the heart, and whom only be glory forever. Hence, I undoubtedly gather that in this last age of the world, many will become blessed by this arcanum. Through what I have this faithfully written for, I have not willingly left anything doubtful to the young beginner. I know many who with me do enjoy this secret, and I am persuaded that many more will also rejoice in its possession. Let the holy will of God perform what it pleases, though I confess myself an unworthy instrument through whom such great things should be effected. Unquote. An open entrance to the closed palace of the king by an anonymous sage and lover of truth in 1645 AD. Quote, among those who devote themselves to the transmutation of metals, however, there can be no such thing as mediocrity of attainment. A man who studies this art must have either everything or nothing. An alchemist who knows only half his craft reaps nothing but disappointment and a waste of time and money. Moreover, he lays himself open to the mockery of those who despise our art. Those, indeed, who succeed in reaching the goal of the magistracy have not only infinite riches, but the means of continued life and health. Hence, it is the most popular of all human pursuits. Anyone who has read a few receipts claims the title of a sage and conceives the most extravagant hopes, and in order to give themselves the appearance of very wise men indeed, such persons immediately set themselves to construct furnaces, fill their laboratories with stills and alembics, and approach the work with a wonderful appearance of profundity. They adopt an obscure jargon, speak the first matter of the metals, and discuss with a learned air the rotation of the elements, and the marriage of Gabritius and with Bega. In the meantime, however, they do not succeed in bringing about any metamorphosis of the metals except that their gold and silver into copper and bronze. When capious despisers of our art see this, they draw from such constant failures the conclusion that our art is a combination of fiction and imposture, whilst those who have ruined themselves by their folly confirm this suspicion by preying on the credulity of others, pretending to have gained some skill in the loss of their money. In this way, the path of the beginner is beset with difficulties and pestilent delusions of every kind, and though the fault of these swindlers who give themselves such wonderful airs of profundity and learning, our art itself has fallen into utter disrepute, though these persons, of course, know nothing whatever about it. The beginner finds it extremely difficult to distinguish between the false and the true in this vast labyrinth of alchemy. It is possible indeed that some dull person may allege in refutation of our reasoning his inability to accomplish those chemical transformations on which it is based, but such operators would be vindicating too great an honor for their ignorance if they claimed to advance it as an argument against the truth of our art. They must not make their own little understanding the standard or measure of the possibilities of nature. At any rate, my word is as good as theirs, and better, since they can never prove a negative. And I do most positively and solemnly assert that I have with my own hands performed every one of the experiments which I have described. And I know many others whose experience has shown these things to be true. How can our opponents hope to prevail against eyewitnesses by bare negation? Study nature. Read the books of genuine sages, who are neither impostors nor jealous churls, and study them day and night. Let him not be too eager to carry out every idea practically before he has thoroughly tested it, and found it to be in harmony not only with the teaching of all sages, but also of nature herself. Not until then let him gird himself for the practical part of the work, and let him constantly modify his operations until he sees the signs which are described by the sages. Nor let him despair though he take many false steps, for the greatest philosophers have learned most by their mistakes. Unquote. The Metamorphosis of Metals by Irenaeus Philalethes, 1694 AD. Quote, but why it is called a stone, though it is not a stone, and how it is to be found. The sages described it as being a stone and not a stone, and the vulgar, who cannot imagine how so wonderful a thing should be produced except by art magic, decry our science as impious, wicked, and diabolical. Some silly persons clamor for an art making the profession or practice of this art punishable by statute law. See how they doing it? See how they doing it? Why you think they had to speak like this? They telling you right now, statute law, regulating them not to practice the art of nature. Like who can do that? And how can someone obey and break the law of freedom, goodwill, intent, harmony, justice, unity, compassion? Now, one can hardly be angry with the illiterate and ignorant persons who raise this cry. But when it is taken up by men in exalted station and profound learning, one hardly knows what to say. These men I also reckon among the rude multitude, because they are deplorably ignorant of everything pertaining to our art, and yet forgetful of their dignity. They join in the hue and cry against it, like so many cowardly village curs. It is neither religious nor wise to judge that of which you know nothing. And yet that is exactly what these people do who claim to be both Christian and scholars. Unquote. A brief guide to the celestial ruby by Irenaeus Philalethes, 1694 AD. And that's so important. Like, you see, they getting persecuted 1694 AD. Christians, nope, gotta go. We ain't having that. Witchcraft, when it's nothing but nature. Next quote. After spending the best part of my life in study of the liberal arts and scientists, and in the company of wise men and judicious scholars, I was compelled, as the result of my observation of mankind, to arrive at the conclusion that the hearts of most persons are set either on ambitious and vain-glorious projects, on sensual pleasures, or on the accumulation of wealth by all and any means, and that few care either for God or for virtue. Oh, that's good stuff. At first, I did not quite know whether to become a disciple of the laughing or of the weeping philosopher, or whether to join in the exclamation of the wise prince of Israel. All things are vanity, but at the length the Bible and experience taught me to take refuge in the study of the hidden secrets of nature, whether pursued at home by means of books or abroad in the great volume of the world. Now, the more I drank of the majesty fount at knowledge, the more painfully my thirst, that like Tantalus, seemed to increase. I had heard that there was a bird called Phoenix, the only one of its kind in the whole world, whose feathers and flesh constitute the great and glorious medicine for all passion, pain, and sorrow, which also Helena, after her return from Troy, had presented in the form of a draught to Telemachus, who thereupon had forgotten all his sorrows and troubles. This bird I could not indeed hope to attain entire, but I was seized with an irresistible longing to become possessed of at least one of its smallest feathers, and for this unspeakable privilege I was prepared to spend all of my substance, to travel far and wide, and to endure every hardship. There was, of course, much to discourage me. Some people denied the very existence of this bird, others laughed at my faith in its wonder-working properties, but most of those whom I met laughed at my quest, and said that, like Narcissus, I had fallen in love with the shadow of my own mind, the echo of my vain and ambitious thoughts, which had no substantial evidence apart from my own folly. The words of the alchemists, said they, are like clouds. They may mean and represent anything according to the fancy of him who hears them, and even if there were such a medicine, human life is too brief for the search. All that makes life worth living will have to be neglected and thrust aside while you are engaged in hunting after it. If we can pick up a knowledge of the secret casually and whilst devoting ourselves to other pursuits, well, but if not, we can very ill spare the time for a closer search. These objections, at least the latter half of them, I meet as follows. The quest of this medicine demands the whole powers of a man's body and mind. He who engages in it only casually cannot hope to penetrate even the outward rind of knowledge. The object of our search is a profound secret, and a man who is not prepared to give himself wholly to this inquiry had much better abstain from it altogether. You either get with it or you get lost, what he's saying, you dig? Unquote. A subtle allegory concerning the secrets of alchemy by Michael Maier in 1617 AD. Another quote. I have, in the course of my life, met with a good many who fancied that they had a perfect understanding of the writing of the sages, but their subtle style of interpretation was in glaring contrast with the simplicity of nature, and they laughed at what they were pleased to call a rustic crudeness of my remarks. I have also frequently attempted to explain our art to others by word of mouth, but though they have called themselves sages, they would not believe that there is such water in our sea, and attributed my remarks to temporary insanity. Unquote. The New Chemical Light by Michael Sendivogius, 17th century. Another quote. And because the philosophers had so obscurely set forth this science in strange involvings of words and shadows of figures, the stone of the philosophers was doubted by a very many men. Tell me, by the immortal God, what is more unjust than for men to hate what they are ignorant of? And then if the thing do deserve hatred, What is of all things more shallow? What more abject? Or what greater madness and postage is there than to condemn that science in which you have concerned yourself just nothing at? Who hast never learned either nature or the majesty of nature, or the property of the occult operations of metals? The counsellor also babbles and croaks, and the pettifoggers of the law, the greatest haters of philosophy, who with the hammer of the venal tongue coin themselves money out of their tears of the miserable, who shipping over the most sacred of laws, have by the intricacies of their expositions persecuted all the world with their frauds. But why do I go after jeers and satyrs? Let these crabbed fellows and their fellow remain perpetually in their opinion, who know nothing. Which is honest, which is pleasant, which is delightful, which lastly is anything elevated above a vulgar doctrine, and who have attained at nothing glorious and famous, but perhaps at some plebeian business from the black sons of Gadamus. But to which purpose are these? I have made the choice of this stone of the philosophers familiar to me, and I very often call it only Minerva, and the greatest pearl of all occult philosophy, or of magic, not indeed of the superstitious, but of the natural. Yet it seems in the opinion of the unlearned to degenerate far from a better study, which is decreed or ordained by the divine will. Unquote. Book of the Chemical Art by Marsilius Ficinus. Here we go again with another quote. Permit me to transcribe a passage from the works of Helmontius. I cannot but believe that there is such a thing as a gold and silver making stone. At the same time, I cannot shut my eyes to the fact that hundreds of painstaking alchemists are daily being led astray by impostors or ignorant professors of the spagyric art. For this reason, I shall not be astonished if immediately upon pursuing my book, multitudes of these deluded victims start up and contradict the assertion which I have made in regard to the truth of this art. One of these gentry denounces alchemy as a work of the devil. Another describes it as sheer nonsense and humbug. A third admits the possibility of transmuting metals into gold, but maintains that the whole process costs more money than it is worth. But I do not wonder at these opinions. It is a hackneyed saying of human nature that we gape at those things whose purpose we do not understand, but we investigate things pleasurable to know. The sages should therefore remember the words of Seneca, de moribus. You are not yet blessed if the multitude does not laugh at you. But I do not care whether they believe or contradict my teaching about the transmutation of metals. I rest calmly satisfied in the knowledge that I have seen it with my own eyes and performed it with my own hands. Even our degenerate age, these wonders are still possible. Even now, the medicine is prepared, which is worth 20 tons of gold, nay, more, for it has virtue to bestow that which all the gold of the world cannot buy: health. Blessed is that physician who knows our soothing medicine, potion of mercury, the great panacea of death and disease. But God does not reveal this glorious knowledge to all men indiscriminately, and some men are so obtuse with a judicial blindness that they wonder at the activity of the simplest forces of nature, as, for instance, the attractive power which the magnet exercises upon the steel. But whether they believe it or not, there is a corresponding magnetic force in gold which attracts mercury, in silver which attracts copper, and so with all other metals, minerals, stones, herbs, plants, etc. We must not be surprised at this persistent opposition to truth. The light of the sun pains the eyes of owls. Belief or unbelief could not make any difference to truth of our art, just as a magnet would go on attracting steel and rendering it magnetic by such contract, even if you did not credit it. Unquote. Golden Calf by John Frederick Helvetius. Here we go with another quote. Of the numerous things in the world, the art and the Tao are the most difficult to comprehend. How then can people of ordinary endowment pass the judgment that there cannot possibly be a way to immortality? If one harbors doubts about the Tao merely because of popular disbelief, then he is assuming the mass to be wise people. How numerous then will the wise ones in this world be? Furthermore, those who understand the Tao and work for its attainment, and they not the most stupid, even more stupid than the common people? Many fear to attempt to seek for immortality, lest they should fail and expose themselves to ridicule as victims of folly and deception. But supposing that the common people are not infallible and that their idea about the Tao is one mistake they make among 10,000 sound judgments, will not those who have laughed be laughed at by those who succeeded, despite discouragement and ridicule? Even the sun and moon cannot shine on everything. How can the people's mind be so omniscient as to be entirely trustworthy? Unquote. On the Gold Medicine in the Yellow and the White by Ko Hung. Another quote. Because so many have written of the Philosopher's Stone without any knowledge of the art, in few books extant, written by our learned predecessors and true masters hereupon, are either lost or concealed in the collections of such, however despised, as are lovers and seekers of natural secrets. We have taken a resolution to communicate our knowledge in this manner, in the intent that those who are convinced the philosophical work is no fiction, but grounded in the possibility of nature, may be faithfully directed in their studies, and have an undoubted criterion to distinguish between such authors as are genuine sons of science and those who are spurious, as writing by hearsay only. So bewildered is human ingenuity when it leaves the beaten track of truth and nature to entangle itself in a multiplicity of fine-spun inventions. The searcher of nature will rejoice greatly in this discovery as grounded in reason and sound philosophy, but to fools it will be in vain. Should even wisdom herself cry out in the streets? Wherefore, leaving such persons to hug themselves in their own imaginary importance, we shall go on. Unquote. On the Philosopher's Stone by Anonymous. So you see, we going in on this bad boy. It's gonna get too deep, so I'm gonna fall off the path. Some ain't gonna be able to hang and get a full comprehension all the way through. And that's okay. It ain't gonna be for everybody. Some people want the hoop and the holler and the drama and give it to me right now. But to get a full grasp of some things on a deeper intellectual level, you gotta see what the sages and everybody was saying who was actually practicing at this time, so you can get a sound mind of attaining the art yourself. What these people was going through at this time was really wild. They was getting persecuted. There was laws and statutes out. They was coming after them. And they named it right up, straight up. Yo, it is the Christians. They coming. And they don't even know nothing about it. They won't even, but they do. They knew about it. They just weren't trying to hear it. You better chill. That ain't in our control mechanism that we trying to see running around here. So we're gonna keep diving into it. This was on the disbelief aspect of it, and it's gonna get wild. But as we dive into this, our whole mind frame will sink into an understanding and comprehension and full grasp, where you absorb the information to where it becomes one with you, as though you recognize it and you was there before, in the art, in the understanding, the all present, right? That moment of now, the existence. You tap in and allow the knowledge to go. So, yeah, we're gonna keep it flowing, y'all. Till the next one. Peace and blessings.